Alright guys, this is part 2 of my video detailing all the problems with Florida's deepfake law, aka House Bill 757. Once again, if you end up liking this video, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and here we go. Now, let's say someone is arrested for private, never shared deepfakes. His defense attorney would definitely have a good case to be made for the fact that you're basically criminalizing him for private thoughts made digital. What can he basically tell a judge? This: Your Honor, the state is saying that if my client fantasized about two women from public Instagram photos making out, that's perfectly legal. But the moment he used commercially available technology to create a 20-second private video of that exact fantasy, never shared, never shown to anyone, he becomes a felon worthy of prison time with rapists and murderers. Where exactly is the victim until the state notifies these women under Marcy's law? That framing puts the prosecutor in a very awkward position. It highlights the Stanley versus Georgia problem, the lack of tangible harm, and the fact the state itself often becomes a vehicle that creates the emotional injury. Because, as I said in my last video, these women would basically be able to live their lives blissfully unaware that these files even exist until Florida decides under Marcy's law to notify them and say, hey, someone created deepfakes of you. Can we show them to you to make sure this is you? Now, let's say that a person is arrested for private, never shared deepfakes in Florida, and his attorney successfully motions the case to be dismissed under Stanley grounds and basically First Amendment grounds and Fourth Amendment grounds. Whatever. Here's the problem. By the time that happens, the damage is done. It's called process by punishment. Florida is basically going to use what I like to call the courtroom equivalent of taking a knee and running out the clock. What do I mean by that? Well, I want to devote the largest amount of time on this video to determine just exactly how much a person's life can be ruined simply out of being arrested. Okay. Now, I'm going to make a football analogy here. I'm going to use my favorite sports team to basically give an analogy of this, okay? Let's say the New York Giants just, are winning the game. They're up by 4. They do a great defensive stop, and they get the ball back with a minute left in the fourth quarter when they're already up by 4. Do they try for another score that's not really needed and wind up running the risk of fumbling or throwing an interception, which this is the Giants, so there's a high possibility of that happening? Or do they just do 4 kneel downs and take a knee, run out the clock, and leave the game with a victory? Well, in this particular case, what Florida basically hopes to do is they know that it's going to be kind of hard to get a clean constitutional conviction. Under House Bill 757, once a defense attorney successfully argues that his client wasn't really doing any harm to anybody, and basically the files were private, nobody knew about them until the state decided to get all up in his business. However, by the time that happens, the man is already arrested, has his mugshot plastered out everywhere, and basically, and especially if this is going to be a first of its kind case, news stories showing what happened. The man's life is basically going to be over if this happens. It is called process by punishment. And Florida is basically saying that if you don't want to have your life ruined over this, don't even try it. Which is basically, well, yeah. And I'll give you prime examples of this, okay? Let's start with employment issues. Even if a man arrested for private, never shared deepfakes works at a pretty chill place that believes that innocent until proven guilty, what do you think is going to happen when the vast majority of the women that work at that place of employment decide to go to HR and say, I don't feel comfortable working with a man that made non-consensual deepfakes. It's either us or him. His job is going to fire him. All right, guys, as I went to edit this, I actually forgot to mention one thing about how a felony charge, not even so much as a conviction, will affect a person's employment chances. Well, the other thing, too, is that it might affect his ability to actually find another job because once hiring managers, Google a candidate's name and see that he was arrested for creating sexually explicit deepfakes, whoever it is just going to throw that person's resume right in the trash. So, yeah, he's going to be screwed in more ways than one. He not only has to worry about being fired, but he also has to worry at that point about being able to find another job simply because the state got involved in his private business. But anyway, back to the video. That's number one. Number two, it'll also affect his dating prospects because as soon as a woman goes online and Googles his name and see that he was arrested for private, never shared deepfake files of a sexual nature, it's going to be an instant ick and block, and he's basically going to get torpedoed in that sense. And of course, there's other problems too, which I will explain right now. There's more than just an arrest and possible mugshot and basically employment and dating opportunities vanishing if someone is actually arrested for private never shared deepfakes. Let's start with the women he deepfaked. Now, a first of its kind case of someone getting arrested for private never shared deepfakes would generate a lot of press. And it would actually be bad news if a lot of the women he deepfaked were actually the press. Let's say he lives in a media market where the vast majority of news anchors and reporters are attractive women. Journalists hate being sexualized to begin with. And if he deepfaked a lot of journalists, female journalists, French kissing each other or making out and getting handsy with their colleagues or their friends, whatever, they would likely be the first to sue. But beyond that, an aggressive prosecutor or DA might actually argue that he targeted them simply because they don't like being sexualized and might add stalking or harassment charges to the list of things that he's already being charged with. Crazy, right? Yeah. Another thing, let's say he's a fan of a certain rock band that's either all female or has like multiple female members. He doesn't have to contend with not only him being sued by those women, but there's a chance that if he actually, has a desire to see them live in person, once the band or its management get wind or get notified that somebody made deepfakes of them making out with each other or whatnot, he would be banned from ever going to their shows. So yeah, the social destruction would not just be about employment and dating, but basically when he gets screwed like that, all because the state decided to morally grandstand, yeah, they're basically taking a knee and running out the clock on somebody's life here. And to me, that's not right. Over private, never shared files that the depicted woman would never know about anyway. Come on. All right, guys, as I went to edit this, I actually just want to mention something here. If a person is arrested for private, never shared deepfakes, and a number of the deepfakes depict actual, real incest, but for example, hypothetically speaking, lesbian makeouts between actual blood sisters, mother-daughter pairs, cousins, that sort of thing. An overzealous DA or prosecutor is not going to care that incest fantasies are actually quite common. They're going to do whatever it takes to throw the book at a person once they see that. And in addition to that, the social ostracization and destruction of a person who was basically arrested for creating and possessing such files is going to be enormous. Basically, thanks to a law born out of moral grandstanding, a once private fantasy that up until then had no discernible, tangible harm or victims is going to become a private spectacle that will basically ruin his life. But anyway, back to the video. Now, there is something I want to mention here. It is a common tactic among AI users to do what's known as jailbreak the AI. What that basically means is use creative prompt to get past the safety features put in place, or in some cases, asking the chatbot section of the AI what you can do to get, to make sure that the files actually pass the censors. Now, let's say a person who was arrested for private never shared sexual deepfakes was asking the AI what kind of clothing alterations they could make to the woman's clothing to get it to go past the moderation filters. Like, let's say he keeps producing a video of two women French kissing each other and it keeps getting blocked, and he runs the photo through the chatbot and says, what can I do differently on this? And the AI chatbot basically says, one of the women's shirts or dress is too low cut. Give it more of, like, say, a higher neckline. That should work. So he tries it, and Viola, it does. Well, jailbreaking an AI like this is actually pretty common in the AI community. It's used all the time. But unfortunately, if someone is arrested for private never shared deepfake files, an aggressive DA or prosecutor can actually use this against them and basically be like, see, he did something that he knew was illegal. He even asked the AI to jailbreak itself. And he might actually use that against the person in the court of law. Never mind the fact that this is a pretty common tactic, But that's what happens when you have morality-based legislation. To the next point, I want to talk about what actually is an unstated main goal of criminalizing even private files. According to some people in the know, the real reason why why some people want even private deepfakes criminalized, like Florida did, is that it basically will work as a deterrent tool to basically pressure the generative AI companies to stop letting people do these files in the first place. Okay, there's two major issues with that. First things first, AI companies, if they know that their outputs can literally facilitate a felony charge for their end users, know that doing so will be bad for business, because from a strictly legal liability perspective, because then they could be held liable. So as a result, what they would probably do is overfilter to the point where the tools become useless, which would basically result in a mass exodus of users who will find solutions that won't basically censor them for the slightest, stupidest little thing. The other thing too is that for the really determined users, this will not stop them. They'll just download the offline versions of all the various AI tools and go completely underground. And this will actually wind up being worse, because those underground offline AI tools do not have any sort of safety features in place that would block or censor inappropriate outputs like the cloud-based ones do. So not only will it not do what they intended to do, but it'll actually make the problem worse, because the determined users will just go underground. Now, I want to mention something here about this whole law in the first place and what it will actually do to AI in general. See, the whole problem I have with this law is that it is the first law of its kind to criminalize even private acts based solely on consent. It does not take into account any sort of harm to the depicted person, just consent. And here's the problem. If you use consent as the sole brightline test for criminality, all of AI is going to be in the crosshairs. Memes, political memes, deepfakes created for parody or satire, or even AI or Photoshop fan edits will basically be on the legal crosshairs. Now, before you start thinking, pretty sure that politicians can know the difference? No, they can't. No, they don't. Okay? Because at that point, once you use the low bar of using consent only as the brightline test for criminality, at that point, a depicted person doesn't even have to prove or claim harm, just that they didn't claim consent. And that's bad. Let me give you an example. Let's say someone creates a deepfake video press conference of an NFL quarterback, trashing his kicker for losing a game. If that kicker is thin-skinned enough and lives in, for example, Florida, he could literally pursue civil or criminal charges just because he didn't give consent to an AI parody press conference. And if you think I'm kidding about this, I'm not. Florida passed a bill, or they tried to pass a bill called the AI Bill of Rights. I think it stalled in the House, but they're trying to restart it again. Now, at first, it basically allowed people to sue if a creator used their likeness in an AI creation for monetary gain. Like, let's say that YouTube channel who created the video of the quarterback monetized it. It would allow somebody depicted in the deepfake to sue if they felt that they were monetizing it for commercial gain, which is fine. But the law also allows people to sue a deepfake creator for misinformation. What do you think parody and satire is? The First Amendment allows people to, freely make parody and satire, but the First Amendment carve-outs are kind of useless if a creator that's been sued has to go to court to prove that his video was parody or satire. By making a person, stand the possibility of spending thousands of dollars and time off from his job to go to court to defend himself just to make it known that his deepfake was created for parody, and any reasonable person should know that. Well, it kind of makes the carve-outs kind of useless. And that's what I'm talking about. Consent and consent only shouldn't be used as the legal brightline test for criminality for private files. There also needs to be tangible harm also weighed into the equation as well. And unfortunately, Florida created a whole mess because they would rather morally grandstand off of one person's story, which basically anybody would have sympathy to, but they didn't need to go full on overboard. And I've pretty much said enough on this video. If you end up liking this video, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I said enough about this. Once again, my name is Sam, and I hope you have a good night. Bye.